With cities that feel 20 years ahead of everything else, to landscapes so dramatic they barely look real, street food that costs less than a coffee at home, and high-speed trains that connect entire provinces faster than you can believe, China will surprise you. Let's talk about everything you need to know before you go. Apps, payments, visas, getting around, how to actually get around without speaking any Mandarin, and why traveling in China is a lot easier than you think. First things first, let's talk about visas. China has expanded its visa-free entry significantly in the last couple of years. Depending on your passport, you might actually qualify for a free visa to enter China. China has been rapidly opening its borders, granting full 30-day visa-free entries to over 77 countries as of 2026. Unfortunately, US citizens are not on that list yet, but there is still a way to get around it if you are willing to just travel China for a short period of time and take advantage of their 240-hour transit visa. This is a transit policy, so it does require you to go from country A into China and then out to a third country, which means you cannot fly, for example, from Los Angeles to Shanghai and back to Los Angeles. You would have to fly, for example, somewhere like Los Angeles to Shanghai to Hong Kong being the third country. If your trip is longer or you don't want to use the 240-hour transit policy, then your best bet would be to apply for a tourist L visa with a Chinese consulate. The second most important thing to talk about is VPN. There are a few things that you should set up before you arrive in China, and I cannot stress this enough. Do not wait until you arrive in China to set these things up because it will be so much more difficult because often you need to be able to receive text messages on your home phone number to be able to access and use some of these apps. And on top of that, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, that's all blocked in China. So if you're going to be using a local SIM in China or using any Wi-Fi, like hotel Wi-Fi, you are going to need a VPN on your phone to access your favorite apps. The ones that worked well for us were Proton, Astral, Octohide, and NordVPN, but that changes all the time. So before you go, look on forums, Facebook, just to see what travelers are using and saying what's working for them. Set it up at home and then test it. Make sure it works before you arrive because you will not be able to download a VPN while you are in China. There are other essential apps that, again, you should set up before you arrive. Having them is basically the difference between a smooth trip and a not so smooth trip in China. WeChat is the first one that I recommend. It's not just a messaging app in China, it's everything. Vendor communication, translation, payment, business contacts. If you're visiting a market and dealing with anybody in a business context, they will expect to communicate with you on WeChat. Set it up before you go and having linked payment method because you can also use WeChat to pay for everything. Alipay is the second. China is mainly a cashless society, and WeChat and Alipay cover all of the payment methods you're ever really going to need. You can set up your international card and even test it before you go by sending 1 to this website, testchinapay.com. Or you could try ordering Taobao to your hotel before you arrive and then finding that package when you do arrive, because that is also an essential part of your China travel experience. You'll use either of these payment apps constantly, and I recommend having both of them set up. One, so that you have a backup, but two, because some vendors do have a preferred payment app. The third one I would recommend is a map app. My preferred map app is called AMap, but I do know that other people use Apple Maps or Baidu Maps, anything except for Google Maps, okay? The thing I like about AMap, aside from that it works well and it gives you optimal walking directions, is that it also includes a AMap taxi service, which is sort of like Uber at home. So once you put in the address of where you want to go, you can select the taxi option and it will call a variety of Uber type vehicles to come and pick you up. You can actually also use AMap through the Alipay app, but I recommend having it separately, just like you would have a Google Maps app separately. Previously, I said that DiDi was the best app for ride sharing here, but actually I think that AMap is better. When you use AMap and select ride sharing, every time I pick a car, I get discounts. The price consistently is cheaper than just using DiDi directly. The other two apps I recommend you can actually use directly through the Alipay app if you prefer not to download the apps, but they are DiDi, which is basically Uber if you don't want to use AMap Taxi. I recommend, again, having both so that you can, one, compare, but two, sometimes maybe you're not in an area where there's many DiDis, but there are AMap taxis or vice versa. So again, it's just useful to have both apps. And two, Meituan. Meituan is a food delivery app, which for me only worked when I had a local Chinese SIM in my phone. But if you want to get any food delivered, especially if your hotel does have a robot that does do the 2-room deliveries and you want to try it out, you're going to want to have Meituan for that. Speaking of SIMs, you're going to want data for this trip. Without it, you really cannot use AMap, Alipay, WeChat, and that is going to make your travel in China so much more frustrating than it needs to be. Your two options are to get an eSIM or to buy a local physical SIM when you arrive. For those people whose phones don't work with eSIMs, you are going to need to buy a physical SIM when you arrive, which is easy to buy at the airport or at local shops like China Mobile. Just remember you need to bring your passport to get that set up. The positive of the physical SIM is that it allows you to use Meituan, the app. However, it does require you to use a VPN if you want to use any of your apps that are blocked by the firewall. And then the perks of the eSIM are that you don't really need a VPN on your phone, since your eSIM is very likely routed outside of China and will allow you to use Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and all the other apps that you use that are blocked by the firewall. Either way, plan on having your own data, otherwise you will be lost. Next, let's talk about how you can get around in China. We'll start with trains. China has built the world's largest high-speed train network, and it's efficient and super impressive. Fast, frequent, affordable, and connects almost every major city. For us, high-speed trains were almost consistently the best way to get around from city to city, and we were able to book tickets on an app, sometimes the day before or the day of, for places that we wanted to go. Although I do recommend booking a little bit earlier if you already know where you want to go, and especially if you're traveling around any major holidays. I booked my trains directly through the app 12306. The first time you book a train, you do need to input everybody's passport information. And if you are buying multiple train tickets, you can put everyone's passport information on your one app so that when you buy the tickets, all of your seats will be assigned close together, next to each other, or as close as possible to each other. There are no tickets, so your passport is your ticket. And when you arrive to a train station, there is a small security check before you get to the area where trains are boarding. So you do need to find a person to manually verify your ID twice when you're at a train station. First, when you first arrive and you're about to go through security, and second, just before you get onto the train platform, you will have to have someone manually verify your ID a second time. So when you arrive at a train station and there are lines of people trying to go through security, sort of like an airport style where you're putting your bags into X-ray scanners, there will always be a person either on the far right or the far left doing manual ID verification. And that's who you're going to need to find when you arrive at the train station. If you're struggling using the 12306 train app, you can also try to use the app through Alipay or buy your ticket on trip.com, although trip.com will have a slightly higher fee. Within the city, public transport is cheap and very efficient. You can either use local trains and metros. Alipay has a transport tab that generates QR codes for you every time you arrive in a new city. So you're just going to go to the transport tab and generate a new metro pass when you arrive in a new city so that you can use that pass to take the train. Otherwise, we took DiDi or AMap taxi for anything that was not covered within the metro system, or if we were carrying our large bags around. It was just a lot cheaper, faster, and more convenient to do so. There's also electric mopeds and e-bikes, which are available. You'll just see them when you're walking on the street, and they'll all have a QR code. You can access those as well through your Alipay transport tab. There will be a button, and you'll be able to find all of the logos of the companies. Then just scan it, and then you can get going. In terms of payments, while you can pay with cash, China is a mostly cashless society, and I think it will surprise you. Locals pay for everything by scanning QR code. Food, taxis, markets, restaurants. Multiple times we hired somebody who was on a moped who offered to take us to the closest train station, and we just paid them by QR code that they showed to us when the ride was over. Personally, we never used cash, and although vendors are required to accept cash, I have heard that they don't always have the appropriate change. So if you plan to pay with cash, I would say to bring smaller denominations just in case. When using Alipay or WeChat with a foreign credit card, there is a 3% fee on transactions that are over 200 won. This isn't super common that you're going to experience this, and often vendors would allow us to split up our payments so that everything stayed under 200 won. It sounds fiddly, but as long as you're comfortable using your phone, it becomes second nature almost immediately. Hotel value in China is amazing. Modern rooms, room delivery robots at prices below what you would expect in the West or even other parts of Asia. The main downsides are that English-speaking staff are limited outside of major international chains, and the bed can be firmer than you would expect. We found that the international chains had softer beds overall, and unfortunately, indoor smoking is still a thing. Even if there were signs saying no indoor smoking, even when we booked the hotel and it said no smoking, you could often smell smoke in the hallways, or two, you'd be able to find ashtrays in your room because I guess people are still smoking anyways. This was less likely to be found in international chains, but unfortunately, a lot of the no smoking signs are not often enforced. We used Trip.com to book our hotels, as Booking.com and Expedia did not really have any good local options. So in general, I would recommend Trip.com for almost all of your China travel booking because you are able to get tickets to attractions and activities, book your hotel, and even book your trains if necessary. In terms of food and culture, eating in China is family style. Multiple dishes shared at the table rather than individual plates. Menus are often only in Chinese, so you are going to want to have some sort of translation app on your phone where you can take a picture and have that translate back to you in English. Or sometimes we would go into restaurants and they would have a QR code on the table. And if you scan that QR code on the table, you'd be able to get the menu on, for example, WeChat, which would have the in-app translation. And then you could do all of your ordering within the app, pay in WeChat, and that would put most of the experience in English. No tipping is expected anywhere except for maybe some very high-end tourist restaurants. We've eaten at restaurants that were very clearly family style, just the two of us sitting at a table for 10. And we have even at times been able to get smaller portions from the menu. For example, we did want to try something, but we didn't want to have such a large portion. We were able to ask if we can have a half portion of a specific item, and kitchens were able to accommodate us. But on the other hand, we've also ordered items that were not what the translation said that they were. So that is something to keep in mind if you have any dietary restrictions. If you are a very flexible eater, you will have no problems in China. And then culturally speaking, there is going to be a little less public space and a little bit louder public activity than you are used to. But overall, traveling in China was very enjoyable. The people were very kind and helpful. You'll be so impressed with the tech infrastructure. And as a visitor, you get to benefit from all of it, as long as you're comfortable on your phone a lot. Somebody near me is speaking and I can eavesdrop on them. Telling me my blood pressure, my heart rate, my skin age. I've heard stories in the past where people were charged more because they were visibly tourists. And I today don't think that's as much of an issue because prices are already set on menus, on QR codes. You can already buy your attraction tickets in advance. If anything, there are deals to be had on apps like Dianping, which is like the Yelp of China that often has coupons and promotions. And honestly, I think the opportunities for scams in China are limited because of how everything is so digital and their tech infrastructure. So before you go, download all of the apps, get a VPN for your phone, and just wait. China will surprise you.